Hi, and welcome back to the Now What Summit. We are excited to have you back with us. Thank you, Ryan, for joining us. Ryan is a Keep Indiana Learning Specialist, and I am very interested in what you're going to present today because inclusivity and accessibility is very important to me. I'll be honest with you, because of my son. And so, whenever you make things personal, then you're suddenly very invested.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Ryan, go ahead and take it away.
Well, thank you, Marty. I am super excited to be doing this today and talking about inclusion. I think it's a word that we're often talking about, but not everyone's sure of what to do with it and how to make it happen in the classroom. So after reading the Building Thinking Classrooms book and attending the BTC conference, I was really motivated to think about how our atypical learners might thrive in a setting like the thinking classroom and adapting some of the practices from the book. So the session today is just going to be identifying those practices that I think most lend themselves toward building that inclusive classroom that we talk about and hope to see in our classrooms. So what I like to do when I start a session is to what I call find your kid. And speaking personally, what I find most beneficial about it is sometimes when we talk about practices or we talk about things that happen in the classroom, it seems big. And we think about all 30 kids in the classroom. And we think about maybe the 90 plus students that are going to walk through your room in a given day. So I like to think about finding your kid. Thinking about a specific student that either you have currently or have had in the past that maybe sometimes grinds your gears, right? They're that little girl, the rock star over there that's got the ball of energy that never quits, right? Or maybe it's a student that comes into your class every day and just has the attitude of, I can't do it, so I won't do it. But I think identifying that student ahead of time, or even as we go, right, that student might change, but having one student in your mind that you think, how would what we're talking about make their experience in my classroom better? Mm-hmm. So as we begin, just think about who that student is for you. And sometimes it's more than one, but I really like to kind of focus on one student. So as we get into this discussion, I think it's important to define inclusion. And I have this definition from the Iris Center at Vanderbilt University. They have a ton of great modules and supports on working with atypical students. And their definition is inclusive schools are places where all students can have access to and can participate in the general education environment given the appropriate supports. So I've underlined a couple keywords there. Access, right? Students have the ability to begin, right, in a classroom. Sometimes students walk into a classroom without feeling like they have access, and they immediately are not part of that environment. And then participate. A student may enter the classroom and feel like they have access, but they don't have necessarily the means. They don't have the opportunities to participate in a class. Maybe that's because of anxiety. Maybe that's because of something that happened to them at home the night before. Whatever it might be, the ability to participate is removed. And so making sure that all students have that ability to participate is key. And then lastly, there's supports, right? Inclusion means providing students with what they need to be a part of your classroom. And, supports come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. It could be something as simple as one of those kick bands at the bottom of a student's seat. It could be something like an instructional aid that it works with a student on a daily basis. Whatever it might be, it could also be as simple as a high five on their way into the classroom. That's a support too, right? So inclusion is making sure that all students have the access to the classroom, can participate in the activities, and have the supports that they need.
Ryan, I loved what you said there about that high five is a support. I think so often as teachers, we overcomplicate. I don't say often. We can overcomplicate supports But man, let's not overlook the easy ones.
Absolutely. In the so-called easy ones sometimes can go the farthest.
Yes.
So what I've done is of the 14 practices, I spent some time looking at 5 that I thought, when we think about those atypical learners, that might make the biggest impact in their ability to be included in a general education classroom. So first, I want to take a look at where students work in a thinking classroom. And you can see in that image, right, we've got the non-permanent vertical surfaces all around the room. And the first thing I want to address is, I remember as a teacher, you start off the year with your 504s and your IEPs, and you have a flood of 504s that are asking for preferential seating. And you wonder to yourself, there is no preferential seating if everyone has preferential seating.
Yep.
So what I love about the where students work practice is that there is no it is all preferential seating, right?
Right.
Every student has access to engage in learning in a way that is meaningful because they are not in the back of the classroom. They're not in the front of the classroom because there isn't one, right? We're all part of this community of learning. And then we think about our students with attention disorders or ADHD. And what I love about the having students up and working is that there is an activity to it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's movement. There's a constant cycle of who has the marker and who's doing the work that keeps things fresh for those students who maybe have a difficult time with attention. And then students with disruptive behaviors, not necessarily someone with an IEP. We have students all the time that what we normally label as disruptive, may benefit in this setting where they're able to get up and they're actively engaged. We know that a lot of disruptive behavior happens when students are bored. So if we're not giving them an opportunity to be bored, then we'll definitely see those behaviors less. Then I wanted to focus on collaborative groups, how we form collaborative groups. And I love the idea of visibly random grouping for a lot of reasons. But if we think about students with anxiety who are, we've been in classrooms before where you say, we're going to get in groups of 3 or get in groups of 5 or whatever it is. And there's the student that throws the hood up. Or there's the student that starts looking around, pointing at friends, thinking, I better get with you. And, if we have this visibly random grouping, it removes some of that anxiety of who am I going to be with? How long am I going to be with them? But it's always random. Some days you're going to get friends. Some days you're going to get not friends, but that it's always going to be an opportunity for you to engage with others. I really want to focus on the idea of identity because we think about students self-identifying as not math or not reading people. And what happens is when we group based on ability, we reinforce those identities. Students are quick to identify, I'm in this group because I'm not good at math, or I'm the kid in this group that is not a good reader. And Johnny's going to help me be a better reader, but I don't want to learn from Johnny. And so if we have these visibly random groups, it removes that self-identifying that happens when we group on ability. And then when we think about our neurodivergent students who have, increased anxiety when it comes to those social interactions, giving them the opportunity to work with different people. It will never be, a perfect scenario, but at least this does provide opportunity for students to experience those outside of their typical circle. All right. The next practice, what types of tasks we use in a thinking classroom. Obviously, we want to use thinking tasks, but what I love even more than just the idea of using thinking tasks is starting with non-curricular thinking tasks. Again, going back to students and identity, when a student comes in thinking, I am not a math student, if we immediately dive into these curricular tasks, they're immediately disengaged.
Mm-hmm.
So bringing in non-curricular tasks that allow for more engagement does kind of level the playing field. It allows all students to get involved and to start thinking. And then I'd be remiss if I didn't obviously bring up the concept of UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and thinking about multiple means of engagement here is providing a variety of pathways into learning and giving students, if I'm a student who learns best from listening, I have those opportunities. If I'm a student who learns best from writing and doing, I have those opportunities. How we foster autonomy in a thinking classroom. We have there's research coming out about the I do, we do, you do model maybe not being it, right? And maybe if we think about you do, we do, I do, different ways to reposition that expertise, pushing out the idea of expertise to students and allowing them to kind of lean on their peers in a more productive way. Several of us have probably had students that have oppositional defiant disorder, and I put this in here because I think when we specifically look at students with ODD, that is a defiance towards leadership. And if we remove the leadership piece from the learning experience and push it back into the class and onto the students, I wonder, but I imagine that, removing that barrier to entry for students like that could be beneficial. And then lastly, building confidence, especially when we think about math and science and people thinking that they are not math and science people, to push that back and allow students to be an expert, right? And, when we think about consolidating at the end of the lesson, doing the gallery walk and letting students be owners of their learning, those students who maybe lack confidence will have an opportunity to say, oh, that was mine. That was my work. I did that, right? And then boom, that's an immediate shot of dopamine that says, I am good at this. I can do math and I can do science. And what an exciting thing. Lastly, how we grade in a thinking classroom. Test anxiety, in my experience, I swear, year after year, I had more students that were anxious about assessment. And if we reposition what grading is not necessarily a summative point in time assessment, but actually an assessment of thinking and an assessment of learning over time, would help to reduce some of that anxiety because we're not placing the emphasis on the summation, placing the emphasis on the process. When we think about assessment accommodations, Building Thinking Classrooms talks about folding back the information to students. So when we think about accommodations and what we're providing to students to make sure that they have the same level of access to an assessment, we're now able to provide that feedback that builds upon what accommodations we've provided, and providing multiple means of expression, another UDL tenet that allows for students to show their thinking in different ways. So it's not just that test at the end, but it is the process. It's what they've done. It's what they've shown that they know and can do and learn over time, that, may come in a variety of ways. It may not just be a test that a test that they fill out. Maybe it's a presentation that they give, or it's a video that they make of themselves explaining a concept for another student to use. Lots of different ways to do that. So I'm going to be done short on time, but I think that's okay. I would love to continue the conversation. This is only 5 of the 14 practices, and they all have have their place with inclusion. So, I'd love to continue the conversation on Twitter. You can email me anywhere you like.
Ryan, thank you, because so many things you said. We want to create safe learning environments for our students, but yet we continue in practices that have been around for ages because that's what we know and what we're comfortable with. But what if we shifted things and made it more comfortable for our students and gave them space to shine? As you were talking about assessments, I was just thinking about all the different ways that kids could show their learning, but we just default to, I'll just go totally old school, piece of paper and a pencil, because that's what we know.
And we know for a fact that learners are different now, right? We know that. And so with that, we have to know that our learning practices and our teaching practices have to change as well with the learner. So I'll go back to the book. There are so many opportunities for changing the culture of our classroom and changing the practices that we have that do accommodate these learners as they have changed.
Right. And so we owe it to our kids to make those changes. Right. Yeah.
Marty, can I ask you a question before you wrap up?
Absolutely.
I know you don't have a session today, so I'm curious, since I have time. What's your takeaway? What is your thing that you took away from the BTC conference? And I'm putting you on the spot, so I apologize for that, but I'm curious.
Yeah, you are putting me on the spot. My takeaways. I guess I have a couple. I have read the book, so I'm not just relying on the conference. I have read the book. I would love a classroom to play with because, so much of Peter's work is built in a math space, and a math space is not where I taught. So, I taught language arts, reading and writing, and I saw so many things in the book and in the research that I could have applied to a writing classroom. Reading also, but I feel like it's a less of a jump to a writing classroom. Mm-hmm. So I would love to play with some students, and because as we think about math, we think about showing our thinking and talking, and that the thinking is where it's at as you learn math. Well, so much of writing is the same thing. Taking these abstract concepts that are kicking around in our head and making them something verbal that we can share and show. I think there's a lot of carryover there. And that's my other takeaway is how exciting it was for the literacy sessions we had at the conference to be so full, that it wasn't just math folks there doing mathy things. There were literacy folks there wanting to stretch how they teach literacy skills, and that there is a space for that. So I'm excited about where that goes as Peter and his team and others start to research these concepts. How do they fit with literacy skills?
I completely agree. I mean, thinking is not something that is confined to math, obviously. So it's an exciting idea. Thank you for indulging me.
Oh, well, you're welcome. That was kind of a rambly answer to your.
That's perfect.
Okay. All right. Well, Ryan, thank you for sharing, because as you said, learners are different, and learners are going to be different, as humans are different, and we need to meet our students where they are. So thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, viewers, for being a part of our Now What Summit. We have, I believe, 6 more sessions to go this afternoon. So we will see you in a bit. Thanks for joining us.